Hello and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Mark Alati, the founder of VIP Betting Services. Mark, thank you very much for coming on. The Business of Betting podcast is proudly brought to you by the Betfair Hub from Betfair Australia. No matter where you are in the world, if you want expert articles from pro punters, from building automated models to betting psychology, check out the Betfair Hub. betfair.com.au/hub. Gamble responsibly. Today I'm joined by Mark Alati, the founder of VIP Betting Services. Mark, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
It's always good to start in the beginning. Tell us your background. What was growing up like? How did it ultimately end up in the wagering and racing world?
Jake, I suppose I'm like any other normal Aussie kid. I mean, it was a betting landscape. I think Australians probably in general love a punt. We're one of those type of nations. I actually read an article many years ago that said per capita we're one of the highest gambling nations in the world, or the most prevalent gambling nations in the world. I just grew up and had a bet. I think my father was a bit of a punter. My brother and I would have a bet. We'd go to the trots with my dad when we were young and still in our pajamas. And, back then we're talking at, Harold Park, you'd have, 10,000, 15,000 people at Harold Park. So we just went along for the ride. And I suppose gambling was a little bit ingrained in me, but I think you either have it in you or you don't. And I certainly did. And then I just moved on from there, I suppose. And as I was growing up, I had a little bit of a foray into owning some greyhounds and owning some shares in racehorses, and then that turned into owning racehorses. And I was fortunate enough to have some good ones. And then I developed a breeding business, and then I started owning plenty of horses and too many mares, and then it was cost me $1 billion for adjustment. So then I thought, well, I better buy a farm. So then I bought a farm called Marquee, it was called Killarney Park, but I've renamed it Marquee Stud, and not as in Marquee as in M-A-R-K-Y, I mean as in M-A-R-Q-U-E-E. I'm not that egotistical. So it was called Marquee. I called it Marquee Stud, and it's an 800-acre property up the Hunter Valley. And so I turned that into a commercial stud. So we sell at all the major sales, and I developed that breeding business. And then from there, I suppose, well, I'd had a crack at breeding, and I had a crack at racing, and obviously ownership and shares and things like that. And then I thought, well, why not have a crack at being a bookie? I actually had a little foray. I actually had an interview to become a bookie when I was about 21 or 22 years old. And fortunately for me at the time, the powers that be said, a little bit young, and we don't know if you'd, I think I'm a pretty aggressive bookmaker now, let alone back then. Fortunately, they gave me some fairly wise advice, and I decided to pursue other business interests because other than the racing industry, I started very early I own an electrical contracting business, which is a pretty substantial business, and I managed to build that into a good business, which then obviously gave me the opportunity. I've had, I owned a fitness center, I've owned a restaurant, just, some really successful and some not so, no real train wrecks, but just anything to do with the business world. And as I was saying, earlier, then the racing issue, then the next natural progression was to become a bookie. The only thing left is to become a trainer. I don't like early mornings, mate, so that won't be happening.
So what would 18 or 21-year-old Mark pick out of that entire bunch if he had to go back and had to pick one? Was there, or even at that time, were you highly focused on, you mentioned you might have had an interview that didn't go so well, but were you highly focused on one of the areas of all of those, or were you always multidisciplinary and looking into every which way to find new businesses?
Yeah, I think I was always looking for opportunities, and my electrical business, I did an apprenticeship just like every other 16 or 17-year-old kid back then, and the electrical business was a natural progression, and because it was successful, I worked hard. I still work hard at it, I think that was what that did was give me the ability to do other things, be it a bit of popular development or and even things like the foray into the stock market. I mean, people call bookies gambling. Anybody that plays the stock market, that's the biggest gamble in history. So it gave me that ability. I think it was just a wise decision that they didn't knock me back. They just said have a rethink. And then as things happen, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I started having children, and then of course the whole bookmaking thing took a bit of a backseat because I had other responsibilities.
What was your experience like throughout that time with the horse racing business in general, like the stud business, for example, or owning horses? As you went through that, I'm guessing it gave you a good sense of the industry and what would ultimately lead later on to an online bookmaking business.
Oh, absolutely. Being an owner, I always say you've got to be extraordinarily resilient. Before I had my own stud, I used to assist at another couple of studs, and one of the stud owners at that stage, we had dinner one night, and he said to me, "Gee, Mark, you take bad news well." I said, "Well, that's only because I get so much of it." I think that it's a very, the highs are so high owning racehorses, and the lows are pretty low. I mean, as I said, I've been fortunate to have a bit of good luck owning horses, and I've really grown to love the animal. I love being up at my farm and walking amongst the yearlings and amongst the weanlings and the mares. I mean, they're a beautiful animal, but when you really get to spend some time with them, and they all have, people just see them out there racing on the track, but they all have, very diverse personalities, and it's a really enjoyable aspect of the industry to hang out with the horses. I suppose it's a luxury I get because I own the property, but a lot of people should try to experience it if they can.
So what did that period of observing betting markets, I'm sure you went to a betting ring or two throughout the time where you may not necessarily have been bookmaking directly. What did your observations throughout that period help you learn as you got toward, starting the bookmaking business? Were there things that stand out that you remember that you always thought, gee, that would be interesting, or this would be better, or this would be worse, and so on?
Oh, look, probably the main aspect, I mean, I'm a punter. And that old saying, nothing improves a horse's form like owning it. I think one of the main aspects was you get set, but you really couldn't. At times, if the horses, there were certain bookmakers that would be more than happy to take a bet. But I suppose the thing that stood out to me was the diminishing number of bookmakers and crowds at the races. But you could, I could always get a bet on, and I'd back them to win a bit of money. And at that time, of course, with even the corporates, you could get on for credit. So, the landscape has obviously changed significantly. But I found that being an owner, it was still okay to get a bet on, and most people were happy to take a bet.
What was the driving force behind starting the bookmaking business? Because it sounds like it might have been just another business that you hadn't necessarily started yet, and one worth getting into, and there was a burning passion from the betting side. But were there other things that stood out? Because it's not a simple thing to just get rolling with.
I did see a place in the market. I know that one of the first things I think I'm in a bit of a unique position, Jake, because I actually think that most of the bookmakers, especially the bookmakers on track now, are career bookmakers that have basically had to become businessmen, and that's no disrespect to them. They're all really good guys. I know a lot of them very well. They've become very good friends of mine, and by that I mean they're used to the business of betting, which is turning up to the track and putting your prices up and away you go. But now there's had to be a transition into being business people, businessmen and women, because there's so many other aspects to what you have to do. So I've sort of gone from the opposite. I'm a businessman that's become a bookmaker. So I know one of the first questions that was asked to me, what do I think moving forward? And I'm on the board of directors of the Co-op, which is a great honour that I was able to get on the board of directors of the Bookmakers Co-Op in New South Wales. And one of the first questions that they asked me, said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, look, I think things have changed, and my attitude is that we're basically people aren't doing us a favour, like we're not doing them a favour taking their money. we've got to. We're no longer in the wagering industry, as far as I'm concerned. We're in the service industry, and you've the choice is so diverse for everybody that you've really got to service your clients. And to me, I took a view of, I'm going to get out there and get amongst the clients and service them and find out what they want. And is it a better price? I mean, every punter wants a better price. Every punter wants to get set for more. But, what are the other, instances? What else can you do for them? I've sort of taken it to that level, and I've tried to transition that into the online business.
Tell me about the co-op, because I've read a little bit about it. There's not a heap of information out there. What are those discussions like, either at the meetings, on the side, before you go, afterwards? Tell us what the idea of the co-op was and is, and how it generally unfolds.
Well, the co-op is basically a collection of bookmakers, both city and country, like metropolitan and country or provincial bookmakers, that we have a meeting every month, and really it's a group of I wouldn't say like-minded people, because what makes a co-op and what makes any board of directors is differing opinions, and it's basically our job to try to try to get, say, press government or the Office of Liquor, Gaming and Racing to legislate different things that would be advantageous to on-course bookies. Previous to me, Johnny Jordan, Dave Dwyer's the chairman. I hope he never retires. He's just, does a fantastic job, and they will canvass, different departments of the government for, wagering relaxation. For instance, you heard me mention about the no credit. Well, on-course bookmakers can still give credit if we like. Yeah. So they were successful in having on-course bookmaking exempt from that. Even things like turnover tax and rebates and things like that. We tried it in stand fees at the tracks and things like that. It's our job to try to negotiate an outcome for all of our members, whether it be country, provincial or metropolitan. So that's what we try to do. As I said, by no means do we always agree, but ultimately, I'd like to think that we're all swimming in the same direction, because it's pretty strong currents against us at times. So we have to try to do whatever we can, and if we do it collectively, it makes it a bit easier than individually.
Yeah, and is it a progressive organisation where you're pushing the boundaries, or is it trying to maintain the status quo and trying to be conservative in the patch of land that the on-course, country, provincial and metropolitan bookmakers hold at this point?
Oh, I think there is an air of, being conservative to a certain point and to sort of not risk what we have. But I think that's, a little bit like, only half watering your plant. I mean, it might survive, but it's not going to grow. So, I certainly like to think that, we've put some things to the Australian Turf Club, for example, and that we think are fairly progressive. We'd like to think that the race clubs would like to partner with us, so to speak, in what's good for us will ultimately be good for them. If we can offer a better product, a better service than our competitors, by our competitors I mean the corporates, then we would like to encourage people to come back to the track. And I don't mean just come and have a drink and if you're a guy, hit on a girl. If you're a girl, get drunk and regret that a guy hit on you or didn't hit on you. I mean, come there to wager, come there to have, an experience, an all-encompassing experience at the track. Get dressed up, but do it more regularly. So if we can offer, things like, get the opportunity to get free bets or get the opportunity to get interviewed or just to have a fun day. Bit of thrust. I like to call it with my clients a bit of thrust and parry, bit of banter, and a fair fight, so to speak. So I think that's an important aspect of the co-op and an important task to try to convince some of the powers that be that we're a really valuable asset to the tracks in general, both like city and country. Absolutely.
Is there a bit of a mission statement for the group, or is it still every item you gotta battle it out, have the discussions, the debates, and then ultimately decide as a co-op what direction to head?
It's funny because we have some corporate guidelines. Our administrator, Les Millership, who again does a fantastic job, he attended a few corporate seminars and corporate governance, and we are developing a mission statement. All the directors over the course of the next few months have got to declare all interest in other entities, and I've got several different businesses, so I've got quite a few interests to declare. And as have some of the other bookmakers. So we are, going towards the, whilst we none of us get paid to be on the board of directors, it's all voluntary. But we are developing, we have the same, minutes of meetings and declare meetings happen, all that. The same that happens on any public company board of directors or every private company board of directors, the same. We've got the same processes and we're governed by the same laws.
Are there any punters allowed in the co-op, or just bookmakers who are, like yourself, punters dressed up as bookmakers?
No, yeah, exactly. That's right. Punters are dressed up as bookmakers. Yeah, just bookmakers.
Tell me then, what is the future of the betting ring? And, on course, participation generally for fans coming to the racetrack is certainly divergent from, when I was younger and probably when you were younger. Generally, those crowds that people talk about probably aren't going to be the same week to week. Maybe you can talk about Flemington in the spring and things like that. But just generally, from a co-op perspective, from your perspective, a bookmaker, what's the betting ring going to look like, and what future do you foresee for it and want to see for it?
Look, I think COVID has probably accelerated maybe some changes to the betting ring, and I suppose if we don't adapt, you wither and die on the vine a little bit. So I think that there'll definitely be changes. There'll probably be several bookmakers that decide not to go back for one reason or another. And I'm not saying that with any inside information. That's just my opinion. I think, Jake, the question is, will people want to go back there and be shoulder to shoulder? I mean, we're experiencing now that shopping centres are open and all that sort of stuff again. People are jamming in there. And, my son went off to a nightclub the other night. I said, how was the social distancing? He said, that was out the window, Dad, but they'd all had about 100 drinks, so that makes sense. But I know that the racecourse are putting in certain parameters and certain guidelines for people to adhere to. So, if you would, I think the days of the betting ring as such, where you've got an outer ring and a rails, I personally would like to see that change. I'd like to see everybody on the rails. So you open it up. I think that enclosed sort of claustrophobic atmosphere of a betting ring may very well cease to exist. And I think I've put a few little theories to the ATC about some options. I mean, I'd like to see a Vegas style VIP betting room, and I don't mean VIP as in my company or my business. I mean, if any of you have ever been to even Star Casino, or people that are considered regular substantial punters, go up to a room and they get food and they get drink and they get all that sort of stuff, and they it's amazing when you go to those places. Some people quite happily do $10,000 playing baccarat, but as long as they get their free spring rolls and egg salad sandwiches,
Yep.
And probably Vegas do it better than anybody, and they do that for a reason, because there's such a competitive market in Vegas. So, I'd like to see something like that put on the track. So basically, really, then the track can cater for punters, for people that want to have a bet, and the limits would change in that room. It wouldn't be like on the rails where you have to bet to lose 5 on Sydney and Melbourne, for example. But it wouldn't be like that. I mean, there'd be a selection of bookmakers. I'd of course like to be one of them. That people that want to have a bet can come and have a bet. Rather than try to have 20,000 or 30,000 online, come to the track. There'll be 4 of us in that room, and choose one or choose all of us. And so I'd like to see something like that to make it to sort of make it a premium betting experience. And for want of a better terminology, we'll call it the rank and file punter. I think the landscape will change. I think there won't be as many bookmakers. I think The courses will look at the positioning of bookmakers a little bit more closely. Separation of bookmakers. I think they'll probably name, and this is only my opinion, they'll probably try to introduce more dining experiences and more seated packages for people. I'd also like to see certain bookmakers issued with a roaming license, and by that I mean not to go and hassle people, but I'm sure, Jake, you've been to plenty of big days where, slipper days and things like that. And the slipper's amazing because, as a bookmaker, we get there first and we're allowed into the course first. But, the Everest Day, for example. Yep. Once those gates open, it's pandemonium, people trying to get a table. And once they get that table, they don't want to leave because if they leave that table, someone else is going to jump in their spot, so to speak. So how do they get a bet on? How do they get a drink? I mean, I'd like to see a roaming bookmaker service where basically, bookmakers are allotted certain areas and you go and you don't hassle these people. You just say, would you like a bet? It's not pioneering. I mean, they've done it in some of the restaurants at the ATC for many years. So it's, again, that's getting back to what I said about you're in the service industry. I mean, I'm sure, a young bloke like yourself has been at plenty of bars in your life and I know myself when I was a young guy, you sit at a table. It's beautiful having a waiter or a waitress come and serve you. We don't have to get up and line up at the bar.
Yep. Well, when we used to go up to Sydney, living in Melbourne, we ended up having to buy the packages just because that exactly what you described. We had to get there at the crack of dawn, and that wasn't always possible when you go up to Sydney for the weekend to be the first one there. If you didn't, then you're really battling most of the day. And then we ended up just saying we're going to pay up front, and it ended up being at least a couple $100, $300, $400, $500, $600 in the end per person. Guaranteed a spot, guaranteed service, guaranteed a bookmaker without a line for 5, 10, 15 minutes sometimes in some of those rings during those carnivals back. This is probably a decade ago now, but that's where overall amenity experience plus service is probably critical.
And that's, well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember coming to the Melbourne Cup one day. I think might have been the second one that Maccabi Diva one. It was Armageddon. The weather was Armageddon. Now I remember it. Myself and a few of my friends had paid $1,200 per head to have a little bit of a lunch package, and and at the time, look, it was good. It was a good experience, but the value. And I actually turned once the heavens opened. I turned to my mates and I said, "This is the best $1,200 we've ever spent in our life," because it was carnage. And again, I think that's, as I said, getting back to the service side of it. If we can, as a group, and I mean work in conjunction with the ATC, as I said, I don't mean people standing by a table saying, "Come on, have a bet, have a bet, have a bet." I don't mean that. I mean to be, the best restaurants you'll go to, the waiters are there, but they're not seen. So if we can somehow cater to the punting public and just make it generally a better experience for them to come to the track. And we as a co-op have got to do our part too. We as bookmakers have got to do our part too. I mean, I know myself, I'm gonna look to put my staff in uniforms because there's obviously a lot of occasions when, especially young people, it's very daunting, I think, to go into a ring and see some guy with a battered up old bag sitting there and everybody's rushing in over the top of everybody trying to put a bet on, and some guy's trying to impress his girlfriend by having $25 on a horse. Pardon me. And I think that's a very daunting experience for people. So if we can make it more inviting, and uniforms is a classic where they don't have to look for Mark Alati in VIP betting or Dave Dwyer or Grant Palmer. They know that we're all in. My staff's in navy blue with silver logo or whatever. It just to make it a little bit more, I suppose professional is maybe too strong a term, but a little bit more professional looking, a little bit more inviting is probably the right term.
Yep. So I don't mean to be insensitive by this, I'll get to a point in a minute, but outside of carnival days especially, what is the advantage for a bookmaker to be on track? And even thinking to provincial, for example, I remember even back when I was living in Australia still going to some midweek or Thursday night Moonee Valley type meetings. It didn't strike me as a great place to be for an on-course bookmaker back then.
No, it's probably not. You're 100% correct that it is not from a profitability point of view, from an expense as far as like a turnover point of view and an expense-driven point of view, it's in a lot of instances it's not the place you want to be. But if you've developed clients, which I've tried to do since I've been on track, if you've developed a client base, again we get back to that service aspect. I mean, Jake, if you go to a pie shop and you go to the same pie shop, every Thursday for your pie in the morning, and then one Thursday you go there and that pie shop's not open, you go up the road to the pie shop up the road and you get a pie from there and say, oh, that pie was all right as well. I don't know if I really need to go to my regular pie shop. So if you're not there, if you're not open for business, then you risk letting another rooster into the henhouse, so to speak. Punters are a pretty hardy mob, and I will say this with all due respect to most punters, that a lot of them aren't fiercely loyal. Probably they shouldn't be either. But if you can provide them with a service and a regular service where they get a roll, or they get on for what they want. Even in some instances, it might be something as simple as, you've got a regular punter that will bet with you all the time, and they've just jumped at Moonee Valley, for example, for a Canterbury on Friday night. They've just jumped at Moonee Valley, and he wants to get on bet on. They've gone 100 metres, but he comes over. Well, you let him on because he's a regular punter. You take his bet. So it's a bit like just a bit offering a service to your punters.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know Monday Night Football's very big here. If you go to the same pub, it might be 20% capacity, but you got your same guy who serves you a few beers and have a chat with. Obviously, Friday, Saturday nights they're packed, and they don't need to close on Mondays just because of the Thursday, Friday night situation. But the point I was trying to get towards is a lot of punters say they've left the track. It's not an advantage for them to be there. They can have a different / better setup from their home office, for example, or a place with solid connectivity and a couple of screens and so on and so forth. Is there an advantage, or could there, or should there be an advantage for you guys at the track? Is that something you guys discuss when you get together at the co-op, or you generally discuss different things? Is there a way to make it more advantageous for you and your colleagues to be there as opposed to not being there?
That's a really good point. Again, one of the things when I first joined the co-op, I said, look, we have no social media presence. I mean, we have a great product. My daughter Sophie does the social media. Was appointed to do a bit of work for the co-op, and she also works for several bookmakers, so she knows the betting industry, and she did a bit of a comparison there over a period of a couple of months, and we were betting in general a substantially better price than our competitors, and by our competitors I mean the corporates and other online bookies, the Tab and we were definitely a better product. Do I understand the beauty of, especially on a winter's day in the middle of July, getting up in the morning? I mean, myself, before I was a bookie, I'd get up. My Saturday was up, go to the gym, grab a bacon egg sandwich on the way back, have a cup of coffee and sit down, and I had a couple of TV screens, and out would come the iPad and the phone, and away I'd go. No need to get dressed. Still, if I hadn't been to the gym, I could still be in my pajamas at home. Do I understand the appeal of that? Yeah, absolutely. But if you're a punter that, look, I don't think there's nothing like being at the track. And as I said, we're working with the ATC on a few different promotional ideas to try to entice people to say, we will go to the track today. We won't stay at home. But I think that we definitely offer a better price because we don't have the guidelines as far as the corporates. We don't have whilst we have staff costs, but we don't have a lot of the costs that they have, and we recognise that on course is we've got to offer better prices, and that's reflected to the punter. They can take advantage of that.
So for the next generation or the next wave of racing fan, let's say, what direction do you think it's heading in terms of, and this is a very simplistic way to think about it, but the racetrack experience being a social event versus being a wagering event or a wagering experience, for example? It seems like it's headed very, very quickly in one of those directions. And, my experience in Australia with horse racing especially in the beginning it was far closer to a wagering event, and then by the end, which wasn't that long ago necessarily, it was far more to a social event with like the things you mentioned with alcohol and parties and live music and things like that. Do you think that's still heading in the same direction, or what's your perspective and viewpoint, given you sit at a different position than I was as a race goer and as a bettor?
Oh, look, you're absolutely right, and that's not going to change. I think a study conducted only a couple of years ago basically said that the new place. When I was a young guy going to the track, you went to gamble. The facilities weren't great. The best you could hope for was ham roll or a pie. So the facilities weren't great. You went to, and there was a lot of hard heads there, and you went to gamble. But I think now, according to the latest studies, basically it's where young, people almost looking for love or other things, go to meet. And because the girls are dressed beautifully and the guys are dressed to the nines in their suits, and it's some areas some places where they would never dress like that unless they were going to a racetrack. Even weddings, they'd probably dress better going to the races. So yes, it's definitely going down the social scene. The future of on-course bookies, unless we adapt, as I said, unless we are given certain licenses by the ATC, we may very well become the sideshow. We may very well become the sideshow alley type at the Easter show, where we'll be there on we'll be invited there on carnival days, and we'll be invited there on for Melbourne Cup Day and Golden Slipper Day and Spring Carnival or Championships in Sydney, and we'll have various locations, and then once that's over, then we'll toddle on off again, and if that, I hope that doesn't happen, and I think if we market ourselves correctly, and I think if we can really work in conjunction with the powers that be, we can establish a place here. I wouldn't say dominance, but a place on track where we could all benefit. Is a number. Look, I suppose it's I use an analogy of a barbecue chicken shop in an area, does really, really well, like super, and then a second one opens up and two of them do good, do quite well. A third one opens up and three of them break even. Then a fourth one opens up and all four of them struggle. Open the fifth one up and they all go broke. Mm-hmm. So, is it a place where it's a rotational bookmaker scheme? But then you don't have that regular. Like we have clients that just want to bet with us because I suppose I always say to my staff, you either got to make them like you or make them hate you. If they like you, they're going to want to bet with you. If they hate you, they're going to want to beat you. But because I'd get off my stand and intermingle with a lot of people, that we have that relationship. So that might suit a lot of punters. That might be like, well, why isn't Mark Alati here? Well, it's not his week on. So, I think that there is a place for us, but it's got to be, financially viable for bookmakers. I mean, we're all business people. We're not there. Just to enhance people's experience. We earn a living. We have staff that we have to pay. So there is a place, but whether we can compete with the whole entertainment aspect of it, I don't know. Which is obviously why I've gone to the online platform.
Yeah, so tell us about that. What was, besides obvious reasons, what was the push to go online, and I guess couple that with a retail business and then having an online business? It's not necessarily that simple to jump from doing one thing to doing both and trying to do both very well.
Look, I think it was expedited by COVID. It was always in the works for that to happen, and the co-op has the platform we use is a system called Jaguars that most of us use on track. And that could be, linked with our online services. So our web developers could do that fairly cost effectively. And look, I suppose you've said it yourself, Jake. You could recognise, you can see what's happening. I've only been a bookmaker for probably 4 years. But even in that time, I could see crowds diminishing, and really it's more. Everywhere you look, all you do is you see someone looking at their phone. Now, either they're checking Facebook or they're having a bet. So if you can't beat them, let's say, you've got to join them. And so I developed VIP betting services. I think that we offer something a little different, and I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal there, but I know it's a bit of a contradiction, but I like to think I'm a bit of a bookie with a bookmaker with a conscience, so to speak. I don't, we try. Look, one good thing about the site is it's very easy for people to exclude, and I think gambling addictions and gambling problems are very prevalent in the world. And I know myself. People have the option to ring me directly, and we have a chat either before they start betting or during. And I'm pretty upfront. I say what I'm looking for is a fair fight. I don't want somebody that's going to gamble their grocery money or their kids' tuition, can't get home or can't get back from the club because they've done their money and can't afford a cab. I have no desire in that. I have no interest in that. I think it's not good for them, and it's not good for me. It's not something that I want. And whilst I'm not people's moral compass, what I try to get through to people is I think that other than the professionals that gamble, I think gambling's supposed to be fun. I mean, people have hobbies, mate. I know a guy that him and his son go and do that indoor skydiving. Costs him like $1,000 a day to do it. If you've ever, I'm sure you've known people who've had a boat. I had a boat, and that was a very costly experience for me, right? And whether it's model airplanes or whatever it is, and some hobbies, as you're aware, Jake, can be very expensive, and people do them because they're fun. So I actually think gambling, is supposed to be fun. If you're dealing with people that it's disposable income, so if they say, look, I've got X amount to set aside for whatever, that's okay. It's fun. And unlike boats, they actually have the opportunity to win out at it. But it's, we try to market ourselves that way. And hopefully, I don't want people getting in trouble. One thing that is very prevalent is the amount of exclusions that happen. And I think it's probably good and bad. I think some people exclude because they've just had a bad day, or I don't know if you've ever had it, but I sure as hell had it when I was punting. You'd walk off the track and say, "That'll do me. I'm done." And then you wake up the next morning and you go, "That wasn't that bad. And I was a bit unlucky." And then the next day you go, "I'll have a bet somewhere." So some people probably regret it. I mean, we've had plenty of people come back and say, "Oh, look, I regret it I excluded by accident." Well, so our hands are tied. You're excluded. There's nothing we can do. So I just think that it's, you've got to try to notice that if someone's, as I said, we're not people's moral conscience, but I think you've got to be reasonable. And to be honest with you, most of the bookies that I know, guys like Dave Dwyer and Grant Lynch and Justin Thompson, guys that are online, a similar platform to me, I know that they have the same philosophy as me. We're not out for somebody to, lose their marriage because they've gambled away, the mortgage payment. We're not interested in that.
Well, I think it's great to hear, because I recall, as you were describing there, growing up, thinking that this was not a part of anything. Like, I don't even remember one responsible gambling advertisement, nothing at the track, nothing on any wagering platforms that I can recall. And, I think about the culture shift that needed to happen back then, and I hope it's happening. It sounds like it might be if you and Dave and your cohorts are thinking in that vein, because I think it can happen. I think if you think about swim between the flags, how successful that's been, even things like drink driving, just don't drink drive. Some of the approaches to that and the mentality around that, and it being more celebrated, that if you do designate a driver and they stick to it, it's not a shame your mate type thing necessarily. It's moved on from that to being important. And I think responsible gambling generally hasn't followed in that same vein yet, and I do hope it changes. Do you think, you probably got your finger on the pulse, do you think that culture shift is happening now?
Oh, definitely. Look, I think, we're in the age of litigation. You living in the States would be well and truly aware of that. And we have to be a little careful. If we recognise someone, there are certain people that gamble. I think this guy probably can't win. and I suppose some people think, bookies heartless, vultures. I can tell you that's not the case. I mean, I know myself. I actually, and the guy was only a small punter, but he lost about $249, I think, to be exact. And he basically sent me an email saying, "Look, I'm doing it a bit tough." So again, I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal. I'm just trying to give you an example of how. And I know that other bookmakers have done the same. I actually sent the guy back some money. And I said, mate, maybe you need to give it a miss. If losing $249 is causing you, to have a bit of angst, maybe it's something that you should look at. Now, fortunately for me, and I think for him, he excluded, which is great. And I know other bookmakers have done the same. I mean, does anybody really think that as a bookie, do you think I'd ever want to read in the paper that someone's taken drastic steps because they've lost their car to VIP betting services or any other bookmaker? No bookmaker that I know would ever want that. So we're in business, sure. We're like any other business. I'm not a not-for-profit organisation. I'm in business. I've got mouths to feed myself, but again, if we can try to focus on people that have the means to deal with the losses, and I'm not just talking big puns. I'm not just talking about leviathans. I'm talking about, as I said, you might have somebody that, somebody gives up cigarettes. I mean, I've never smoked, but I heard a guy buy a pack of cigarettes the other day, and I nearly keeled over what he paid for them. But if someone gives up cigarettes and then decides that, I'm saving $250 a week on cigarettes, I might have a punt with that $250. Well, the punt's a lot healthier than the cigarettes to start with. But again, it's people using money that they've got set aside, and it's no different than they set aside X amount for fuel and tolls and rego and house insurance and maintenance to their house or whatever. It's no different than that. They get to have a bit of fun, have a chance of having a win, and not adversely affecting their life. And I think it's really important for all of us, to be on the lookout for people that have got an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do hope it continues in that vein, and if not already, but into the future, it's far easier for people to exclude, and excluding isn't a negative. It's not a knock on someone. It's nothing other than a good decision and a good choice, and hopefully that permeates through. And I wanted to ask, you talked about some big punters before and the Leviathans, when they come along, what's your bookmaking style? What's your approach? Are you looking to be aggressive? Are you looking to be conservative? Has it changed over the last couple of years? And when we talk about some of these bigger guys or the groups that come along, I'm guessing you're not too worried about them or scared to take them on, but generally, how does it go for you and the team?
Oh, I'm a lunatic. I mean, I have a bit of a joke with everybody. Look, when I started, I was fortunate. I sort of did a little bit of a stint at the provincials, and I went straight to the rails. An opportunity came up, and I'm a bit like that. All the squeakiest wheel, Jake. I wanted to be the squeaky wheel till I got what I wanted, so to speak. And I was on the end of the rails, and it's a hard place to ride a bet, especially when there's not a lot of people there. So I adopted a very aggressive approach, and some people would have said, I'm sure some people said, "Oh no, this guy can't last. This is not right what he's doing," because I basically took on all comers, and I laid things for a lot of money. I had some bad days, but I had some very, very good days too. And there was a method to my madness. I had to one, create a platform for myself and create a name for myself, so to speak. Where people could have a bet. I offered people, as I said, a pretty good service. Look, I know the rule is you're supposed to stay on your stand, but I didn't like just standing on the stand all day. I like to get out and have a chat and have a laugh with different people. So I wasn't about trying to steal people's business. I was just trying to offer an alternative package to different people. So, I took on pretty much all comers, and I bet them to lose a big chunk. Has my style changed? Not so much. All that's happened now is I've probably recognised the heart of money, and I'm less inclined to be aggressive with those guys, which is common sense. There are certain punters, and in fairness to some of my peers, quite a few of my peers did warn me and say, "Look, this guy, you won't beat. Year in, year out, we've been doing this a long time, you won't beat him." And they were right. So I adopted a bit of an approach to that, where I obviously am a bit cautious for those guys. But I think that everybody deserves, the right to have a chance to win. I mean, if punters get to a certain point where they've had a bad day, the last thing someone needs if they've lost, let's say $3,000 for the day, and then they, probably not a good example. Let's say it's $10,000 for the day. Not too many people lose $10,000 for the day, but if they had, and they suddenly want to have, 500 on something at 20 to 1, well, I'm not going to say no to them because they have a right to try to get out. And if it wins, which has happened to me before, if it wins, well, it wins. And I'm okay with it. I mean, I've actually told people at the track, look, you've had a really good day. I'll be here next week. Take your money, go home, enjoy yourself, buy your wife a gift, or, buy your son a car or whatever, and then come back next week and we'll start it all again. So I think, people have to realise that, if they've had a good day, well, they've had a good day. So yes, it's a long-winded way to get to the answer that, I'm fairly aggressive in what I do, and I like to give people the opportunity to have a bet.
What about the middle tier, let's call it, where you obviously got the bigger punters, the winning punters. You got those that are there for fun, recreation, entertainment, 5 each way, 20 each way type punters. And then what about those that are putting a fair bit of time in? They might do a pretty good job with the form. They're decent at picking a few winners and betting relatively well. They'll probably break even for you, maybe win a little bit, maybe lose a little bit. What does that segment of the market look like for you? Are you welcoming all of those? Are they great for your business, great for turnover, or how do you think about it? Because I don't think too many people talk about that group too often. It's often the one end of the scale or the other. Certainly when you talk about minimum bet laws and some of those things, it's at the far right end of the scale, and then Melbourne Cup Day and all the guys and gals that are there for one day of the year. It's in that end of the scale. But what about those in the middle? Where do they fit within your overall business and your approach?
Oh, look, they're an important part because they help make the book. And I suppose I'll qualify a couple of things here, Jake. Some of the very big punters aren't necessarily the best punters. When I say the best punters, I mean they're not necessarily winning punters because their big punters don't make them winning punters. I mean, look, bet laws and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the rank and file, if you call them rank and file punters, those guys that do their fun, we've got some very clever guys that seem to win a fair bit. What I look for with my clients, and I talk to them about it regularly, I suppose what I look for is loyalty. And I preach this. It's not about win or lose. It's not about, I want you to be loyal because you always lose. I actually want you to be loyal if you win as well. And that's not so much because I want a chance to get my money back because, if they're that good, I'm not going to get my money back anyway. But it's more about making a book. It's more about, having the idea of trying to, lessen the results. I might have guys that win all the time, but, if I'm sending a bigger guy for a lot more money somewhere else, well, I'm cheering their horse because it's a better result for me. And in some instances, when you've got, and any bookmaker that says they don't, I think is probably being a little bit untruthful. The clever guys that bet with you, you can take, if you're laying the favourite for a lot of money, and some of them, we'll call them pros, and there's several of them out there. If they're happy to bet around the favourite, then probably gives you a little bit more confidence taking the favourite on for more. So, they're also sourcing information, even though it doesn't sort of come across that way. And, and look, I'll say this as the minimum bet laws, and it's an interesting conundrum, I think, because in any of my other businesses, if I don't want to work for a client, then I don't have to. I don't think bookmaking should be any different now. Everyone's going to say, oh, yeah, you just want to take on the smartest. That's not necessarily true. I think what it is that, if I've got a particular pro that bets with me, they'll have a bet, and more often than not, they're going to win. And I accept that, and we bet them the minimum because, I'm running a business model that's got to be profitable. But the fact is that I'm happy for them to bet with me, but why should they have a situation where they've got 20 people in an office to push a button at the same time and they get on with 20 of us at the same time? That's not a fight between equals, let's say. That's not what I call a fair fight. And that's fine, and that's the way the laws are written, and we adhere to the laws. But that's just an interesting story because if don't want to work like for a particular client in, say, my electrical business, then I don't have to work for them. I only work for one client in my electrical business because I chose not to work for other clients. Why should bookmaking be any different? What's your opinion on that, Jake?
I think it's going to be forever discussed. It probably has been for a long time. I guess it's probably, I think the way the analytics can be done now, potentially, it's far easier for the business owners, the bookmakers, let's say, to sift through all that and find out exactly what's going on relatively quickly. So I think it is a challenge. I think, I'm legally trained. My opinion on some of this stuff is often based on the law and regulations, how they are, and trying to describe exactly what the situation is and what it means for those participants involved. And I see from both sides. I see the bookmaker want to run a business. It's profitable, hopefully, and it's not a non-for-profit, and you don't want to be out there just writing tickets to these people who are able to win. And there are many ways to do it. People arbitrage, people find middles and scalping, people might be match betting, they might be bonus bet, all these different things that they can and are doing. So I think there's plenty of sympathy that should be had for someone on that side. And then I also understand it if you're a punter and you're trying to run your business based on some assumptions and then those change. I would imagine there's some angst that comes with that, just given that you've tried to map out a plan and you've done a fair bit of hard work and you feel entitled to some degree that you should be able to enjoy the payoffs of that. But that's just unfortunately not how it is and not how it goes.
I mean, look, we let them on. I mean, unless the odds are coming in, and it's an amazing thing that the clever guys, a lot of them, within almost instantaneously, and we know they're not associated, but they'll bet at the same time. And they bet it when they get value, when it gets to a particular price, and they bet. And then obviously we have the option of rejecting people that are, when the price is already changing, and that's fine. And our system does it automatically, whether it goes in or out. Our system does it. So, but again, and I've discussed it with them, and I said, look, I let you on because that's the rule, and we play inside the rules. And it's interesting that you mentioned, bonus bets, because I wanted to touch on that. I think that there's too much ambiguity around the bonus bet laws. I mean, no one can offer an inducement for somebody to open an account, but once they open an account, you can give them whatever you want, or whatever they want. I think that if we're serious about responsible gambling, I think bonus bets and account matches and money back for second and protest payouts, and I think that we've got to wean punters off that and get back to giving them a better price and a better product. I don't think people realise that it's actually reflected in their price that they're getting anyway. So realistically, whilst they might struggle to win on their bonus bets, even their normal bets, they're actually getting lesser a price because it has to be factored in. I mean, any business has to do the model and factor in that it's, if people are giving that away, then that's an issue. And I personally think that it's become an entitlement that people are just used to, especially the younger generation. They're just, we'll have people open up an account and look, and we know, and I think, we know who they are and what they do, and you would have heard the term promotional abusers. And I think that there is a spirit of cooperation amongst bookmakers in regards to that. That yes, we're all running our individual businesses, but when you've got guys that it's the same group of 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 guys that one guy will come and say, I can get all these guys signed up, but you've got to give them this, and then they go to and then they have their bet, they turn their money over, and out it comes, and then they go to the next. And that's of course their right if people want to give it to them, and I've had to fight fire with fire, and when it comes to guys like myself taking on the corporates, well, they've got a bigger cannon than me, so. But ultimately, I think the real key to it, and I've mentioned this to a betting steward at Racing New South Wales. I said, with the ambiguity that surrounds the laws, I personally think we have to wean people off just assuming that you put in $100 and you get a $100 match, or a standard call will be, I've just lost $200. I want a $200 match. Well, because you've lost $200, should I just give my money away to you? It seems to be very prevalent now, and some people, I'm led to believe, make a living off getting bonuses from various bookmakers, because there's quite a few of us out there.
I'd be shocked if pretty much anyone that bets hasn't opened an account with someone purely for the reason based on a bonus bet or a free bet or an inducement to at least begin or think it's coming. And that's probably one thing on the responsible gambling side, especially, that could be addressed a little bit better. No great solutions necessarily in my head, but I would say that, you know, a lot of people in, you know, certainly listening to this or within the industry have set up a betting account purely because of that reason. And I don't know that that's necessarily a great thing.
Oh, look, we do it because I have to fight fire with fire.
Right, exactly.
We are very clear with people that will ring us and say, or email us and say, we're going to set up an account. And I say, we'll set up an account first. We're not offering you inducement to open up an account. You set up an account and you'll find I'm a competitive bookmaker. I would like to get back to the old-fashioned, service and price type setup. I think where myself and my sort of peers that are still on the at the track, both Sydney and Melbourne and other states as well, I think where our advantage is going to be when we do get back to the track is that our system, so our track prices will be directly reflected on our website. So I think when we, at the moment when we're in an auditorium, I've got a home office, we'll bet the VOP or the ABA or tab price or whatever, and we tweak it a little bit. We move some out, we bring some in, we tweak it a little bit ourselves, obviously, and we set our own markets in a lot of instances. But I think that when we're on track, when we get back on track, when we're betting 480 because we've got other bookmakers there on track that are betting 480 that don't have an online presence, and we're matching them, and everyone else is $4 or $4.20. That's going to be reflected in our online business, and I think that's really going to be an advantage to our, to our clients. No bookmaker can give, bet boost, bonus bets, account top ups, and a better price. That business model is, Armageddon. That's, doomed to failure. So, I'd like to think that that's really going to be our advantage moving forward. And where does it head? I mean, we're not doing sports betting at the moment. I know the margins aren't great, and again, I think, Jake, that sports betting, whilst it's some people the model works for it, but if someone wants to have a bet on a handball game in Sweden with me, then there's one of two things. I don't want their business because they obviously have a problem if they're betting on a handball in Sweden, or they're a lot cleverer than I am if they're going to have a bet on a handball game in Sweden. Yeah. So either way, I don't want their business. So I don't see my business going down that route. We'd like to specialise in racing and do it well. Will we offer NRL and AFL? Probably next year if there's an appetite, but it'll be as an add-on to service my existing clients. It's getting back to that service thing that I'm very heavily driven by. So other than that, we'll do thoroughbreds and we'll do some trots and dogs. I'm awaiting approval for those. But my attitude is, we want to do racing. VIP betting services want to do racing and do it well and look after our clients and grow our business organically. And try to offer somebody for everybody, be it. I mean, I rang a guy that he was a $5 punter, and there was an incorrect result it got put in, which is human error, and we corrected it straight away. But I rang him, and to be honest with you, he nearly fell off his chair that I rang him. He said, "I can't believe you rang me. It was a $5 bet." I said, "Mate, why should you be different than someone's had 5,000 on something? It's it's a service that we offer." And a guy rang the other day and wanted to process a withdrawal, and I answered the phone. He said, "Oh, is this Mark?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Mate, you're answering your own phone." I said, "Well, someone's going to answer it. May as well be me." Again, I'm not trying to sort of, put myself as something different to my peers. I know Dave Dwyer does the same thing. I know Justin Thompson at Tombet does the same thing. I know Grant Lynch at Lynchbet does the same thing, and a couple of the guys in Melbourne. So hopefully, people will appreciate that. We're involved and hands-on. We're all Australian owned. So, we pay tax here. We do everything we've got to do. And hopefully we get people's support.
Tough business. There's a lot going on in the bookmaking world other than just showing up with the bag, some cash, some prices, and hopefully the horses run around a track.
It's funny, Jake. When the first just before I was on the board of directors of the co-op, but the first actual co-op meeting, general co-op meeting I went to, there was a bookmaker, I just can't remember his name. He was mid-80s, and he stood up and he said, "Guys, it's not like the old days, and his exact words were, it's not like the old days where we used to open the bag and money used to pour in. And I laughed for about a week after it. And I thought, gee, and I love sitting with some of the older bookmakers and hearing their stories. And people back in those days, mate, used to bet in houses. I mean, every race they bet in houses. And it's an incredible story. And, I don't know if that's a particularly good thing, but, a lot of people did very well at it, but it is a changing market. And please understand, Jake, I'm not sitting here saying there's no place for the corporates and no place for the tab. I mean, because there is. I mean, I bet back with the tab a lot because they're a valuable mechanism for bookmakers that want to lay off if we want to lay off. I want to have a good relationship with them. So there's no reason why, whilst we're in a competitive market, there can't be some sort of spirit of cooperation. And I think problem gambling is a bit of a bugbear in mine that I think needs to be addressed. And I think, moving forward, we all have to look at that with an open mind. And is there an argument, Jake, for if someone excludes with VIP betting, for example, they exclude with everybody? National exclusion register. Is there an argument for that? I don't know. I'll probably get death threats after people hear this from various other bookies, but I just think it's something that we have to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one final question to wrap up here with you, Mark. What does success look like for you in 3, 5, 7 years? Obviously, going through a pretty big transition to have the retail and online business working together, and obviously all the challenges that the industry faces just generally, as well as you and your peers collectively. What do you essentially put down as the markers in those timeframes?
Look, I'd like to see my online business grow to a business that can facilitate most, if not all, clients' needs. I've got great loyal staff. I'd like to be able to help them maintain their employment, and I'm sure I can do that. I think that I'd love to see some of the ideas that we've come up with the ATC, and I say the ATC because that's my tracks of choice because that's where I work. But I mean, generally all over Australia, I'd like to see a spirit of cooperation between on-course bookmakers and the relevant racetracks to preserve us. And I don't mean we need a handout. I don't mean we need anything particular. But I mean, I think we just need to be given a fair run, to be given an opportunity to compete with the Leviathan, corporates, and to have a situation where, we definitely have a place on track, and in what form that is yet to be determined. But I'd like to think that we couldn't. I think that if we went to, for instance, the VIP room model, I think every track in Australia, or major track, would adopt it. And I just would like to see, everybody work and play well together, mate. And more importantly, everybody stay happy and healthy. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you very much for your time. It's been a lot of fun chatting. A lot of different things we didn't cover. We'll have to save that for another day. You're a man of many talents, obviously, but it's been great to chat about the betting world, the bookmaking business, and thanks again for your time. It's much appreciated.
Mate, I really appreciate you having me on, and any time. It's what I think the program you do is fantastic, and it really gets a different view out to a lot of people. So I've listened to quite a few of them, and they're really entertaining. I hope this doesn't disappoint.